what really happened to women who refused to marry in medieval times, and more sleepy history story. Hello there, and welcome to a quiet journey back in time. Tonight we'll be exploring a particular thread in the tapestry of medieval life, focusing on the choices and paths of women who, for various reasons, chose not to marry in a world where marriage was often considered the primary, if not sole, destiny. Imagine, if you will, the slow, quiet rhythm of a medieval village or a bustling yet still town. The sun has begun its descent, casting long, soft shadows across cobblestone streets and thatched roofs. The air is cooling, carrying the distant sounds of evening. A barking dog, a blacksmith's final gentle hammer blow, the lowing of cattle returning to their pens. Our journey takes us to a time roughly between the 11th and 15th centuries, predominantly in Western Europe, a period brimming with life, yet vastly different from our own. The time when the social fabric was woven with threads of tradition and expectation. For many, the narrative of medieval women often centers around marriage and the roles of wife and mother, and indeed, for the vast majority, this was the path. Marriage was a cornerstone of society, a practical and often economic arrangement for families, for security, for lineage. But what of those who did not or could not follow this path? What became of the women who remained unmarried? Did they simply fade into the background? Were their lives without purpose or meaning? We shall see that their stories, though perhaps less frequently recorded, are just as rich and varied. Let us first paint a picture of the world they inhabited. The sounds of the day have mostly faded, replaced by the gentle hum of evening. Perhaps a lone owl hoots softly from a nearby ancient oak. The light from hearth fires flickers through small, unshuttered windows, casting warm, dancing glows onto the rough, wooden walls of homes. Consider the village at dusk. The villagers have finished their supper, often a simple meal of pottage or bread and cheese shared around the communal warmth of the fire. Children are being settled for the night, their sleepy murmurs slowly quieting. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth hangs gently in the cool night air. For some women, the decision or circumstance of remaining unmarried was a conscious choice, often driven by spiritual devotion. The church played a significant and pervasive role in medieval life, offering an alternative path to women who felt a calling beyond the domestic sphere. These were the women who entered convents and nunneries, institutions that provided not only spiritual sanctuary, but also a degree of autonomy and intellectual engagement. not readily available to many married women. Imagine the quiet stone cloisters of a medieval convent. The sounds here are different from the village. The soft, measured footsteps of nuns walking the corridors, the gentle rustle of their habits, the distant murmured prayers at vespers or compline drifting through the cool night air. Inside these walls, women found community, purpose, and sometimes even power. They would rise with the sun, or even before it, to attend morning prayers. Their days, filled with a structured rhythm of devotion, study, work, and contemplation. Their hands might be busy with needlework, creating intricate altar cloths or vestments, or perhaps, in the scriptorium, meticulously copying and illuminating manuscripts, the scratch of a quill on parchment, the gentle turning of a vellum page. These were the sounds of intellectual and spiritual labor. They cultivated herb gardens, tending to fragrant plants, used for medicine and cooking. The earthy scent of rosemary and lavender mixing with the clean smell of beeswax candles burning softly in the chapel. Some nuns became abbesses, powerful figures who managed vast estates, oversaw financial matters, and held significant influence in their communities. They were educators, healers, administrators, often far surpassing the scope of influence available to their married counterparts. The light inside the convent would be dim, often from a few flickering rushlights or small beeswax candles, illuminating the faces of women as they read or prayed. The shadows would stretch and dance on the ancient stone walls, creating a serene and timeless atmosphere. The reasons for entering a convent were varied. For some, it was a genuine spiritual calling, a profound desire to dedicate their lives to God. For others, it offered an escape from undesirable marriage prospects or a refuge for women who had no dowry or family to support them. Life in a convent was not without its challenges, of course. It demanded discipline and sacrifice, but it also provided a framework, a protective enclosure in which women could lead meaningful and productive lives outside the traditional confines of marriage. Imagine the deep quiet of a convent night. The last prayers have been said. The candles extinguished, save for perhaps a single sanctuary lamp glowing softly before the altar. The only sounds are the gentle rustle of the night breeze through the cloister garden and the distant chirping of crickets. Now let us turn our attention to women who remained unmarried outside the cloistered walls of a convent. These women, too, navigated a society that often expected them to marry. For some, This unmarried status was temporary. They might be young women waiting for a suitable match or saving for a dowry. Perhaps they were assisting their families in the household or on the farm, their contributions essential to the family's survival. Imagine a young woman in a rural household. The sun has just set and the evening meal has been cleared. She might be sitting by the hearth, the fire crackling softly as she mends a piece of cloth or spins wool into thread. The rhythmic whirring of the spinning wheel, a comforting, sleepy sound. Her days would be filled with the tasks of the home, grinding grain, baking bread, tending to the garden, caring for younger siblings. Her hands, accustomed to the feel of rough fabric and the weight of a wooden bucket of water. The air in the cottage is warm from the fire and smells of baked bread and drying herbs. The sounds are gentle, the soft breathing of sleeping family members, the distant murmur of the wind outside. For other women, remaining unmarried was a lifelong condition. This could be due to the lack of a suitable dowry, a scarcity of men, perhaps due to war or plague, or simply personal choice or circumstance. These women often found ways to support themselves and contribute to their communities. They might become servants in wealthier households, providing labor in exchange for lodging and sustenance. Imagine a large, bustling manor house at night. Most of the household has retired, but in the kitchen or perhaps in a servant's sleeping area, a few unmarried women might still be awake, preparing for the next day or simply settling down. After a long day's work, the kitchen might still hold the lingering sense of a grand meal, roasting meat, sweet pastries. The sounds are softer now, the gentle scraping of a pot being cleaned, the quiet shuffling of feet as someone tidies the last remnants of the day. They might sleep on straw pallets in a shared room or even in a corner of the kitchen. The sounds around them are the creaks and groans of an old wooden house settling for the night, the soft whispers of the wind through the gaps in the walls. Others became craftswomen or merchants, particularly in towns and cities. Women could be found working as brewers, bakers, weavers, spinsters, seamstresses, even innkeepers or shopkeepers. These were often single women who needed to be self-sufficient. Imagine a quiet medieval shop at the end of a long day. The merchant woman, an unmarried proprietor, is closing up for the night. She carefully lowers the heavy wooden shutter over the window. The sound, a soft thud as it settles into place. Inside, the shop smells of wool or dried herbs, or perhaps freshly baked bread. Depending on her trade, she might count her coins by the dim light of a single beeswax candle, the gentle clinking of metal on wood, a soft, sleepy sound. Her living quarters might be above the shop or in a small room behind it, simple. But her own, the sounds of the town outside, are slowly fading. The distant cries of street vendors have ceased, the clamor of the day, giving way to a peaceful quiet. These women contributed economically to their communities and often maintained a degree of independence that was rare for their married counterparts. They formed their own networks of support, relying on female friends, family, and neighbors. The light would be from lamps filled with animal fat or small beeswax candles, creating soft, warm pools of light. In the deepening gloom, the shadows would stretch and merge with the darkness beyond. Consider also the widows who, having been married, found themselves unmarried again through the loss of their husbands. While not women who refused to marry, their experiences after widowhood often mirrored those of lifelong unmarried women in their need for self-sufficiency and management of their own affairs. A widow might take over her late husband's business or manage the family's land. She would often be in a position of greater legal and economic independence than she had been during her marriage. Some widows chose to remain unmarried, relishing their newfound autonomy. Imagine a solitary widow sitting by her hearth, the fire, a low, comforting glow. Her children, if she had any, are long asleep. She might be thinking about the day that has passed or planning for the morrow. Her hands, perhaps, still busy with some small task, a piece of embroidery or the mending of a garment. The sounds are soft, the gentle crackle of the fire, the rhythmic ticking of a small wooden clock, if she were fortunate enough to own one. The wind might sigh softly around the eaves of her home. The legal status of unmarried women varied somewhat across different regions and times. Generally, an unmarried woman, particularly a widow, had more legal rights than a married woman. She could own property, enter into contracts, and represent herself in court. These were significant freedoms in an age where married women were often legally subsumed under their husband's identity. The quiet of the night deepens. The distant sounds of the village have faded almost completely. Perhaps only the occasional hoot of an owl or the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze remains. For some, the unmarried state was one of vulnerability, particularly for those without family support or means. Life in the Middle Ages was often harsh, and single women could face economic hardship and social marginalization. without the traditional protections of marriage. They might rely on charity or informal networks of support from neighbors and friends. The sense of community was strong in medieval times, and people often looked out for one another, particularly in times of need. Imagine a very poor unmarried woman, perhaps living in a small shared room. The night air is cold, and she pulls a thin blanket tighter around her. The only light is the faint glow from a distant street lamp. If she is in a town or the moon shining through a small window, the sounds are few and far between. The quiet breathing of others in the room, the distant sound of church bells chiming the hour, a low, mournful sound in the deep quiet of the night. The lives of women who refused or were unable to marry were not a monolithic experience. They were as diverse and complex as the women themselves, ranging from the spiritual devotion of a nun to the hard practicalities of a shopkeeper or a servant. What unites their stories is their navigation of a world that often expected a different path. Their lives demonstrate the resilience and adaptability of women in carving out meaningful existences for themselves within the constraints of their time. As the night deepens further and the world outside grows stiller, let us reflect on the quiet strength of these women. Their choices and their paths, though perhaps less celebrated in history books, are an integral part of the human story. The moon might now be high in the sky, casting a silvery, ethereal light over the sleeping medieval landscape. The stars twinkle softly like scattered diamonds on a velvet cloth. The air is cool and crisp, and the world is wrapped in a profound silence. We can almost feel the chill of the night air against our skin, hear the distant whisper of the wind through ancient trees, see the faint glow of moonlight on cobblestones. This quiet, peaceful journey back in time allows us to witness a different pace of life, a different set of expectations. And as the sleepy quiet of the medieval night settles fully around us, we can imagine these women in their various settings resting after their day's labors. The nun in her cell, the merchant above her shop, the servant in her humble sleeping place. Their lives were not always easy, but they were lives lived with purpose, with quiet determination, and with the enduring human capacity for adaptation and for finding one's own way. The last lingering sounds of the night are fading perhaps. Only the gentle sigh of the wind remains, a soft lullaby carrying us further into rest. The air is still and peaceful, and the world sleeps. May your own dreams be as calm and as peaceful as this quiet medieval night, the ambient medieval music slowly, almost imperceptibly, fades completely into silence. Sweet dreams. The air continues to grow colder, and the night deeper, as we remain in the quiet streets of our medieval town. The silent craft of the night, as the heavy wooden doors are barred and the iron bolts slid into place. We think of the women who lived not in the great halls or the stone convents, but in the small, narrow timber houses tucked away in the side alleys. For the woman who lived alone, the evening was a time of preparation for the long day to come. In the flickering light of a tallow candle made from rendered animal fat, she might sit by a small loom. The rhythmic, soft thud-clack of the shuttle passing through the warp was the heartbeat of her home. Many women who did not marry became spinsters, a term that would eventually, centuries later, change its meaning. But at this time, it was a respected trade. They spent hours, days, years, drawing fine fibers of wool or flax into consistent thread. The motion is hypnotic, the fingers pulling, the spindle dropping and spinning over and over in the silence. The smell of raw wool, slightly oily and earthy, fills the small room. Outside, the moon reflects off the damp thatch, and the world is still, the gathering of shadows and light. In the larger towns, some unmarried women lived together in communal houses. Known as beguinages, these were unique spaces, neither fully of the world, nor fully apart from it. Imagine a courtyard, surrounded by small, neat stone cottages. A low wall separates this world from the muddy, chaotic streets outside. Here, the silence is intentional, a choice made for peace. As we walk through the courtyard in our minds, we see the faint glow of hearths through the leaded glass. The beguines were women who sought a life of simplicity. They supported themselves by washing linens, or nursing the sick, or making the delicate lace that was so highly prized. The sound of their work, a soft splashing of water, the snip of iron shears, the low murmur of two women talking as they fold a heavy linen sheet. These are the sounds of a community built on shared independence. As the bells of the great cathedral toll for the final time tonight, these women snuff their candles. One by one, the courtyard falls into a deep, velvet darkness. The rhythm of the seasons, the life of the unmarried woman, was tied closely to the turning of the year. In the winter, when the sun sets in the middle of the afternoon, the world becomes very small. The woman sitting by her fire listens to the wind whistling through the gaps in the timber. She wears layers of heavy wool, dyed in muted colors with roots and lichen, madder for a dull red, or woad for a faded blue. She might reach for a wooden bowl, filled with a simple stew of dried peas and onions. The spoon scrapes softly against the wood. Scrape, scrape. The steam rises, warming her face. This is a moment of profound quiet, a moment where the pressures of the feudal world the taxes, the lords, the expectations. All feel very far away. In the spring, she would be out in the communal fields or her own small garden plot as soon as the first light touched the horizon. Her hands would be deep in the cool, damp soil, planting leeks, cabbage, and medicinal herbs like feverfew and hyssop. The cycle of the moon and the cycle of the crops provided a structure that marriage otherwise would have. There is a deep, slow comfort in knowing that the earth will always turn, and the seasons will always follow one after the other, the gentle fade into sleep. Now the fire in the hearth has died down to a bed of glowing orange coals. The room is mostly shadows now, long and soft, dancing slowly on the low ceiling. The woman reaches out to bank the fire, covering the embers with ash so they will stay warm until morning. This is her last task of the long day. She moves slowly, her joints perhaps a bit stiff from the cold, but her mind is calm. She lays down on her bed, a simple mattress filled with straw or dried bracken, covered with a heavy woolen quilt. The straw rustles softly as she settles, a sound like dry leaves in a gentle breeze. Outside, the entire village is now asleep. The hearths are cold. The animals are still. The stars move across the sky in their eternal, silent dance. The weight of the blankets is a comfort. The darkness is a blanket of its own. There is nothing more to be done tonight. The history of these women, their quiet lives, their small triumphs, they are all held safely in the stillness of the past. You are safe, you are warm, and the world is at peace. The embers in the hearth are now but a faint, pulsing red, like a slow, steady heartbeat in the corner of the room. The air is very still now, and the deep, heavy silence of the medieval midnight has settled over the fields and the stone walls alike, the wisdom of the hedgerow. For the woman who lived on the edge of the village, perhaps in a small cottage where the tilled earth meets the ancient forest, the night was a time of deep connection to the natural world. She was often the one the villagers turned to when the children coughed, or when a fever took hold in the heat of summer. Though she lived alone, her hands were the ones that held the knowledge of the earth. Imagine her wooden shelves, lined with small ceramic jars and bundles of dried plants, hanging from the rafters. In the darkness, the room smells of dried meadowsweet, earthy valerian root, and the sharp, clean scent of dried mint. She spent her days, not in the gossip of the market, but in the quiet observation of the woods. She knew which moss grew on the north side of the oak, and which roots needed to be dug. Just as the frost began to bite the ground, as she lies in her bed tonight, she hears the wind moving through the high branches of the forest, a sound like a distant ocean whoosh whoosh. It is a companionable sound, the breath of the world, moving around her small, sturdy home. The midnight vigil in the great cities, like Paris or London, the night was never truly silent. But it was much quieter than we can imagine today. There were women who spent their nights in vigil, not always out of religious duty, but as part of the rhythm of their work, the candle makers working in the cool of the night, so the wax would set more firmly. Imagine a long, narrow room, the air thick with the scent of melting beeswax. A woman moves slowly, dipping a long wick into a vat of liquid gold. Dip, lift, cool. Dip, lift, cool. The repetitive motion is like a prayer. The wax drips back into the vat with a tiny soft plip, plip. She works in the near darkness, her eyes adjusted to the single flame that lights her way. She is a master of her craft, an unmarried woman who has built a life, drop by drop, layer by layer, just like the candles she creates. When the morning comes, she will have rows of straight, pale tapers, ready to light the cathedrals and the counting houses. But for now, in the deep night, she is the only soul awake, a silent guardian of the light, the sound of the water, near the rivers, the sound of the water, flowing over the stones, is the constant music of the night. Women who lived by the water, the laundresses and the gatherers, knew the river's many voices, the slow, heavy pull of the current in the winter, and the light, dancing chatter of the stream in the spring. Tonight, the river reflects the moon, like a ribbon of silver moving through the dark landscape. The wooden piers creak softly. Creak, creak, as the water nudges against them. The woman who lives in the small hut by the bridge hears this music as she drifts deeper and deeper into sleep. To her, the river is not a boundary, but a road, a constant moving thing that connects her small world to the great sea far away, the great stillness. The candles in the windows have all been extinguished. The watchman has made his rounds, his footsteps echoing once, then fading into the distance. The medieval world, without the hum of machines or the glow of electricity, was a world of profound, a velvet darkness. It was a darkness that didn't feel empty, but full of rest and of the weight of history. The women we have walked with tonight, the nuns, the spinsters, the shopkeepers, and the healers, they are all resting now. Their hands, which worked so hard during the light, are still. Their minds, which navigated the complexities of their time, are at peace. The stars above, the same stars they looked upon, continue their slow, silent journey across the sky. The world is very, very quiet. The blankets are warm, the pillow is soft, and the air is cool and clean. There is no hurry. There is no noise, only the gentle, slow passage of time. Sleep now, as the history of the world wraps around you like a soft, woolen cloak.